Welcome to Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adolfo. Today we are here with freedom fighter and former political prisoner, as well as jazz artist, Brother Bilal Sunni. How you doing, Brother Bilal?
I'm doing very good. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming back onto the show. One of the things we want to talk about is political prisoners. You know, at the time of the recording, it's known as Black August.
Yeah.
And you know, before we go any further, I also just want to acknowledge Hugo Pinnell, who is, you know, now an ancestor who was part of Soledad Brothers rebellion in 1971 with Jonathan and George Jackson.
Right.
But can you tell people what is a political prisoner?
A political prisoner is a person who is in prison because of their political activity. They're doing work involved in changing the political landscape in any fashion, and they're arrested for it, and they're held. You know, they don't even have to be. If they're held against their will, if they're detained, then they're political prisoners. Some people refer to them as political detainees, but that's what makes them a political prisoner. It's usually, especially if that work that they're doing is against the state that controls, that's in control of political activity, the state that oppresses. In our case, when we're fighting oppression, the state that oppresses us, oppresses our people.
Now, we've had a series of political prisoners probably all throughout time, and I think one of the most famous political prisoners is never looked at as being a political prisoner, and that was Jesus the Christ. According to the scriptures, he would have been considered a political prisoner who got the death penalty. Right. But as we know, we move forward, and some of your comrades, some of your closest associates and friends and family members have been political prisoners. And there's one case in particular, the RNA 11. Can you able to discuss that? And if so, can you tell us about the RNA 11?
Okay, the RNA 11 was one of the first cases that grew out of the modern day liberation struggle. In Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi, organizers went down to begin organizing around the needs of the people and the eventual plebiscite. And what happened, the local sheriff, the local Jackson, Mississippi police, they actually wrote to the federal government and saying that we have a group of people down here who are claiming sovereignty over this land, and they said they needed the help of the federal government and to try to determine how to resolve this matter. As a practice of what has been our practice through the Ministry of Defense, whenever we come into an area to do organizing work, we would get in touch with the local police department and tell them what we're doing, so that they know not to interfere with our work, that we're doing this work peacefully. But what they decided to do, even though they had been told by officials of the RNA how to operate with us, they decided that they would come at night. What's often done is they create a position in order to have a raid. They had several people who were wanted by the police, who they claimed they thought they might be working with the Republic of North Africa, and so they were going to come to see. But when they came to the door, they never asked for these people. They just told everybody to come out within 60 seconds. And when that 60 seconds were up, they started firing. Fortunately, there were brothers inside who were military trained who fired back. And a police officer a police officer was killed and one was wounded on the Jackson, Mississippi police force. And so they took as many people as they could capture. They captured them in that house and in the surrounding area, and took 11 of them. Took 11 of them to jail. Those were known as the those people were known as the RNA-11. One brother just recently passed away, Kareem Jabafunde, just recently. He was the youngest. Remember, I believe he was 15 or 16 when this incident happened. And another, well, I won't go into naming everybody who was in it, because some of the people have gone on to do very progressive things and revolutionary things, but they haven't been connected with it. And so we would just leave it like that.
Yes, sir.
You know, rather than confuse the issues in terms of where people are coming from. But again, I would advise people to study that case. It's a part of public record.
Right.
So even though we just don't discuss up front everybody who was involved in it, because of the connections to their families and how that might affect them now. But it's public record, and you can study it, and you can find out exactly who was involved, and it might pleasantly surprise you to find out that some of the people that were involved are still involved in the struggle, involved in the liberation struggle in big ways, and still moving on. This case of the RNA-11, Dr. Imari Obadeli was the prime defendant in this case with 11 co-defendants. He was not even on the scene. He was in a house several blocks away. The house that was attacked was the government house. He was in a house several blocks away, and he got the most time, even though he wasn't. And the reason they got the most time because they said that he was the leader, and as the leader, they gave him the most time. So this was what we call the most classical case of political prisoner. Brother Chokwe Lumumba often spoke of Imari Obadeli as a consummate political prisoner because he fit the definition by heart. He wasn't even doing anything but laying down sleeping, and they woke him up and told him he was under arrest, and under arrest for the activity that took place in this, several blocks away, in which he wasn't present.
Okay, well, we need to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to touch on the counterintelligence program, because I believe that's essentially what we're talking about with this case right here. Right. So you're watching Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adolfo. We have Bilal Sunni, former political prisoner, on the show today. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adolfo. Today we're discussing political prisoners with former political prisoner, jazz artist, and still, current freedom fighter Bilal Sunni Ali. We just got finished discussing, the case of the RNA-11, Republic of New Africa 11, and you touched on how the state worked with the local police department and how, God bless the dead, Imari Obadeli was incarcerated for something that he was not even, directly involved with. Right. And as we, found out later that there was a program called the counterintelligence program that sought to, disrupt and completely dismantle many of our
and
neutralize was the key word, many of our liberation movements. And I want to touch on something that often doesn't get discussed when we discuss the counterintelligence program, and that what kind of impact did it have on our families? Because and the reason why I bring that up is I've had the chance to meet Prince Imari Obadeli, Dr. Imari Obadeli's son, and in meeting him, I saw the impact of how this young man had to grow up without his father, and he also said that and growing up without his father. Even his mother was left alone sometimes because of him being, you know, incarcerated. And can you tell us how the counterintelligence program impacted our families?
When we say that the counterintelligence program offered as its one of its goals was to neutralize and disrupt, in their own documents, they state that their main goal, that their primary goal was to prevent organizers with this ideology of revolutionary nationalism from having any effect on the next generation of people. So that's directly our children. That's directly against. That says that the program was designed to disrupt our families, to break up our families, to make it sure that we would not have any effect on our children, the next generation. And that's what they were talking about, and to a large extent, that's what they did. They incarcerated people. Sometimes, like in the case of me and my wife, both of us were imprisoned at the same time, and we weren't the only ones where both husband and wife were in prison at the same time. Sometimes it was worse than that. Both husband and wife were killed, and they didn't have, you know, it wasn't just, see, COINTELPRO wasn't just about arresting people. When they say neutralize is a code word for kill. You know, so whenever you see neutralize in the FBI documents, that means they want to kill that. They want to kill that idea, or they want to kill that person when they say neutralize them. So that's what they did. They wanted this generation to grow up without the ideology by not having the people who promoted the ideology and who taught the ideology around.
Now, have you ever had a chance to see any FBI files on yourself?
Yeah, I got a chance to see it through the Freedom of Information Act, and they sent me a file which was about this big, maybe about 20 pages altogether, saying that that's all they were able to find. If they would find more, they would send it to me.
Right.
But what happens a lot of times is that they don't release information because there's it's part of an ongoing investigation. And they don't release any information about ongoing, continuous investigations. When I was on trial, Chokwe Lumumba was able, through a fingerprint expert, to get the information out of them that I had been under surveillance, even though I had been out of prison since 1972. This was 1981, and I had been under surveillance from the time I got out of prison until the time I was arrested again. So it was ongoing, that's called an ongoing investigation. So when I asked for that material, because it was an ongoing investigation, they only gave me a little bit of the material.
Okay.
But I find more information about myself when we got information on that the FBI had on the National Committee for Defense of Political Prisoners. They had about this much information, and a lot of it was about meetings that I was present at as well. And that's the thing we want to often point out to people about the counterintelligence program is that the counterintelligence program was the name of the program that the FBI ran. So the FBI is not supposed to investigate so-called citizens of the United States. But the CIA ran programs too at the same time that the counterintelligence program, which was paraphrased into the term COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program. The Central Intelligence Agency had a program called Operation Chaos, designed to disrupt and neutralize the effects of black liberation movements. The very same thing, but the CIA is expected to investigate all sorts of anything that could consider to damage the United States government or any of its activities, any of its trade, etc. So because the CIA there was no big talk about the CIA having such a program, or the National Security Act having such a program, or the United States Army, or the United States Navy, all of these agencies had intelligence program designed to neutralize the Black liberation movement. But the FBI is not supposed to have anything where it keeps its citizens under surveillance. So that's why that one is blown out. But we really should be focusing on all of the various counterintelligence programs from all of the agencies that were set against us at that period.
Okay. Now, you mentioned in one of the trials that Chokwe Lumumba was able to, find some information about, and I believe that was the case of Dr. Mutulu Shakur versus the United States. Now, if you're able to discuss that, I would like to know some more about that case.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what they did, I was telling, but they had a fingerprint expert come forward, and he didn't mention me. He just mentioned the other people at the defense. And so when Chokwe rose to to question him, they objected on the basis that, well, he hadn't mentioned me, Chokwe's client, but Chokwe said that, he had a right to cross-examine, any witness. And he said, so he asked him some specific questions. He says, you said that Bilal Sunni Ali's fingerprints were not found. Why were you looking for Bilal Sunni Ali's fingerprints? And so the fingerprint expert explained that when a crime scene happens, when a crime takes place, the FBI will send the fingerprints of certain people to be looked for. They just, because Chokwe asked him, do they match fingerprints against all of the fingerprints that they have? How do they come up with a match? And they said they have sent specific people, and one of the specific people that they sent was me.
Wow.
So one of the specific people could be you. You just ain't been in a trial where you've had a lawyer able to bring that information out of a fingerprint expert.
Okay.
But just from that, we were able to think.
Bob, we need to take a break, and we want to come back. I want to continue discussing this case. You're watching Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adolfo. We'll be right back. You're watching Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adolfo. We're here today discussing political prisoners with Baba Bilal Sunni Ali. Now, one of the cases that you were involved in or tried in was the United States versus Mutulu Shakur.
Right.
So then, just the thought of that, you got the United States versus one person. That just seems, like a whole lot of stuff.
Well, that one person's named, and instead of listing everybody else, they'll just select one person. And they'll say that one person, like Mutulu Shakur, et al., that's like a Latin term, which means, and everybody connected with it.
Okay.
Just like the Panzer 21 case was known as the case of the state of New York versus Lumumba Abdul Shakur, et al. Not saying that it was just him that they were looking for, but everybody else, the other 20 defendants, as well. So that's how that.
You were actually acquitted on that case, you and your wife. What is your wife's name?
Okay, my wife's name is Fulani Sunni Ali.
Okay.
And she was a grand jury resistor. She wasn't tried on the case. She was held. She was held along with 18 others as grand jury resistors for refusing to testify, for refusing to cooperate with a grand jury that was clearly designed to dismantle the Black liberation movement. So rather than cooperate, rather than go on with the facade that we were a criminal enterprise and this was a grand jury investigating the criminal enterprise, they know what this is. You ain't pulling the wool over our eyes, and we ain't cooperating. That was their position: no cooperation.
Now, if you're able to discuss it, can you tell us more about the case of United States versus Mutulu Shakur?
Yeah, what I would like to point out that although it's called the United States of America versus Mutulu Shakur, Chokwe, who was counsel,
Right.
Chokwe was counsel for the Republic of New Africa, renamed the case.
Okay.
The Republic of New Africa versus the United States of America.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I'd say that's very important because Chokwe, as counsel, conducted the case very differently than the average, than the standard case in which a criminal lawyer would defend his client. He looked on the case based on how he named it, based on the facts that the people at the defense table, that the United States government were in conspiracy against the people those of us who were at the defense table. It was in conspiracy because there was a conspiracy, like with the fingerprints, to involve us in the case, even if we wasn't in it. They was trying to make us have a case. So we know that Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who I was heavily associated with during the same period when my fingerprints were being sent, his were most likely also being sent, because we worked together almost on a daily basis for a number of years during the anti-drug work, and during that anti-drug work was part of the health work of the Republic of New Africa, and so we were doing that work, and in doing that work we were under surveillance, and because of that work we were targeted and sought after and eventually put on trial because we were returning people who were expected to be dead. We were returning them to life. One of the things that I used to do with Mutulu Shakur that we did in our daily work of fighting drugs is that we would walk the streets, and when often the police would cover a brother or sister's whole body with a blanket and say that they had OD'd, and we would demand to see them. We would demand to see them and try to revive them. And so we were constantly in the face of the police, because they were saying people who were dead that weren't dead, and we were proving that they weren't. We were proving that they weren't dead.
Now, you were using acupuncture, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Later we began to use acupuncture, in that same program, but that's the way, until we got to the point where we were using acupuncture. That's what was some of the activity of our program.
Okay.
Was to find the people who were being pronounced dead who wasn't dead, right, and bring them back to the community.
We got a little over a minute left, and I want to make sure that we touch on a brother who was also a fierce freedom fighter, brother Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin. Can you share some words about him, please?
Yeah, I'd really like to. Brother Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin was not only my imam in the community masjid, but he was also my neighbor. He lived around the corner. He lived around the corner from me. And when I talk about a continuous investigation, this is a case where when he was on trial, the lawyers tried to get information brought forward about him being under surveillance, and the motion was constantly denied because under that same thing about they don't release information. But there were over 40,000 pages of information that we held that could exonerate him. There was actually a camera on the corner, like about 100 yards from the masjid. The camera was like maybe 20 yards from where the scene that they accused Imam Jamil of being in a shooting incident with sheriff deputies. They claimed that where this took place, where they say it took place, was within 20 or 25 feet of this camera. If they would show the
footage,
material from the ongoing investigation, which they say they're not allowed to do, it would completely exonerate Imam Jamil.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time on this episode, but if you want to get more information on political prisoners, you can go to the JerichoMovement.com website, and you'll see information about Imam Jamil Abdul El-Amin, as well as Dr. Mutulu Shakur, Jalil Muttaqin, and a host of other political prisoners and freedom fighters. We want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
We have to get this information out there, and once again, you're watching Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adolfo. Remember, support our political prisoners, support our freedom fighters. See you next week.
Free them all.